The first light of dawn crept over Silver Creek, painting the dusty main street in pale gold and long blue shadows. Shops were just waking up. Doors creaked open, the scent of fresh bread drifted from the bakery, and the clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoed from down the road. Yet, even amid the daily routine, something was different that morning. Something that made heads turn and whispers stir. Jessica Lawson stepped off the creaking stagecoach, boots landing hard in the dirt. A battered Stetson hat pulled low to shield her eyes from both the rising sun and the curiosity of strangers. She carried little more than a canvas satchel and an air of determined defiance. The townsfolk noticed her right away. She was new, unknown, and didn't fit the mold. A penniless cowgirl with sunburned skin, dust-stained jeans, and the kind of straight-backed pride that only comes from surviving more than your share of hardship. She paused at the edge of the main street, surveying the town with cautious hope. Silver Creek was rough and raw-boned, the kind of place where fortunes flickered and vanished like mirages. Already, a knot of townspeople gathered on the boardwalk outside the saloon. Mrs. Hargrove, the baker's wife, leaned close to the barber and muttered, her voice carried on the dry breeze. "Who is she anyway? Looks like trouble riding in with the sunrise." Jessica's story, though unknown to them, was written in the way her eyes lingered on the hardware store's window, the way her hand strayed to the thin, frayed purse at her hip. She had come west chasing the promise of a new start, running from a past where loss seemed to shadow every step. Back in Missouri, she had watched her father's ranch burn, her mother buried on a windswept hill, her dreams crumbling with each season of disappointment. Now, Silver Creek was her last hope. She drifted down the street, catching glimpses of suspicion and amusement from shopkeepers and ranch hands. She paused outside a dusty notice board, where a flyer for the day's livestock auction fluttered in the wind. "Auction, today at noon. Cattle, horses, equipment, all welcome." Jessica's heart leapt. Maybe, just maybe, this was the opportunity she'd been searching for. If she could buy a horse, find work, stake her claim in this unforgiving land, she might finally build something lasting. But as she fingered the last $25 in her purse, anxiety gnawed at her resolve. $25, barely enough for a meal and a roof, let alone a horse. A small group of boys darted past, chasing a yapping stray dog through the dust. One of them skidded to a halt, gawking at Jessica. "You ain't from around here, are you?" the boy said, voice cracking with both challenge and awe. Jessica tipped her hat and offered a thin smile. "Not yet, but maybe soon." The boy grinned and darted away, laughter trailing after him like tumbleweeds on the wind. Inside the general store, Jessica scanned the shelves, calculating how far she could stretch her coins, beans, coffee, a single hard biscuit. She felt the weight of every glance, every whispered rumor. No one offered help. No one offered kindness. Except for Samuel Walker, the new owner, who watched her from behind the counter with a look that was more curious than wary. Jessica took her meager supplies and headed back outside, the midday sun climbing higher, shadows shortening. At the far end of the street, the corral gates were thrown wide and a growing crowd pressed close, eager for the day's entertainment. She could feel the tension building. Silver Creek loved its spectacles, especially when someone was about to lose. As Jessica joined the edge of the crowd, she overheard a loud, mocking voice, Pete Jenkins, the loudmouth who always seemed to have an audience. "Heard there's a wild horse on the block today," Pete called out, eyes sweeping the crowd before landing on Jessica. "Maybe one of you greenhorns will be fool enough to try your luck, if you got any to spare." Laughter erupted, but Jessica didn't flinch. Instead, she watched as a team of wranglers dragged a massive gray draft horse into the pen. The animal's coat shimmered with sweat, muscles rippling beneath the hide, a mane wild as a storm cloud. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That's Thunder, mean as a rattler, broke 3 fences and kicked Jim Turner clear to the fence post last month." Jessica's breath caught. Thunder was beautiful, wild, and misunderstood. She saw fear in the horse's eyes, but something else too, a deep, wounded pride that mirrored her own. The auctioneer's gavel banged against the post. "Start and bid, $25. Who'll take a chance on Thunder?" The crowd fell silent. No one moved. Eyes darted between Thunder and the auctioneer, then back to Jessica. She felt the weight of expectation and risk, the possibility of both ruin and redemption. In that moment, she made her choice. She stepped forward, voice steady. "I'll take him. $25. Every cent I got." A gasp rippled through the crowd, quickly turning to jeers and laughter. Pete Jenkins spat in the dirt. "Well, look at that. Lady's throwing her money in the fire. Won't last a day with that brute." But Jessica didn't waver. She handed over her last bill, meeting Thunder's gaze with steady determination. As the crowd drifted away, still snickering, Jessica slipped a rope around Thunder's neck and whispered, "Easy now. It's you and me, friend." As she led Thunder away from the corral, the noise faded, replaced by the sound of the horse's heavy breathing and the distant cry of a hawk overhead. The future was uncertain. Silver Creek was a hard place, but Jessica knew one thing for sure. She'd come too far to let fear decide her fate now. She walked toward the empty edge of town, Thunder's hooves leaving deep prints in the dust, and the first chapter of her new life began beneath the wide, endless sky. The noon sun burned high and unmerciful over Silver Creek, the heat shimmering off the corral rails and baking the already parched dirt into a hard, unforgiving crust. Jessica wiped the sweat from her brow, her gaze fixed on Thunder, the massive gray draft horse shifting restlessly behind the corral fence. The townsfolk had gathered, drawn as much by the spectacle as by the hope of gossip to fill the long afternoon hours. The auctioneer, an old man with tobacco-stained teeth and a battered straw hat, hammered his gavel with a flourish. "All right, folks, settle down, settle down. Next up, we got Thunder, strong as a freight wagon, wild as a twister, and just about as likely to turn on you if you ain't careful." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, but nobody stepped forward. Thunder pawed at the ground, his massive shoulders tensing each time the wranglers tried to get close. The scars across his flank spoke of a hard life, of fights with fences and men alike. Jessica watched, heart pounding, as a young wrangler with trembling hands edged toward Thunder, only to have the horse swing his head with lightning speed, teeth snapping inches from the boy's arm. "See?" Pete Jenkins crowed from atop the fence, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "That animal ain't right in the head. Broke old man Carter's gate last winter. Trampled 2 hands just last week. Anybody here dumb enough to take him home deserves what's comin'." The auctioneer tried to rally some courage in the crowd. "Start and bid, $25. Come on now, folks. Who'll take a chance on a little muscle? He just needs a firm hand, that's all." But the crowd shifted back, shaking their heads. Some muttered about curses and bad omens. Others laughed, eager for someone else to play the fool. Jessica could feel every eye settle on her, some mocking, some pitying, most simply waiting to see her fall. The sun blazed on, sweat trickling down Jessica's back, but she stood her ground. In Thunder's wild defiance, she saw a reflection of herself, wounded, wary, but not yet beaten. She remembered her father's words, spoken on nights when the world felt too heavy. Courage isn't about not being scared, Jess. It's about standing up, even when you are. With one steady breath, Jessica raised her voice above the jeers. I'll bid $25. The silence was absolute. Even the crows perched on the telegraph wires seemed to pause, watching. Then, all at once, the murmurs exploded. Shock, derision, even a note of excitement. The auctioneer blinked, as if uncertain he'd heard correctly, then banged his gavel. Sold! To the young lady in the battered hat! Pete Jenkins almost choked on his tobacco. You gotta be kidding me! She'll be lucky to make it through the night with that beast! He'll have her tossed into the creek by sundown! The crowd burst into laughter. Jessica's cheeks flushed, but her jaw set in determination. She strode forward, pressing her last crumpled bills into the auctioneer's calloused hand. Thunder watched her, ears flicking, nostrils flaring, muscles rippling beneath his storm-gray hide. Jessica approached the horse with slow, deliberate steps, careful not to move too quickly. She met his gaze, dark and wary, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow until it was just the two of them. Two souls, battered by life, but not yet broken. It's all right, big fella, she murmured, voice low and steady. I ain't gonna hurt you. We're both strangers here. The wranglers stepped back, eager to put distance between themselves and Thunder. Jessica reached out, hands trembling only slightly, and slipped the rope halter over his head. Thunder shuddered, stomping once, twice, but didn't rear or bolt. Jessica breathed out slowly, feeling the tension between them begin to shift. As she led Thunder out of the corral, the crowd parted like water, keeping well clear of the giant horse. Pete Jenkins hollered after her, You sure you know what you're doing, girl? You can't gentle a demon with a kind word? Jessica ignored him, focusing on Thunder. Each step was a test of trust, his and hers. The afternoon heat bore down, but Jessica walked steady, Thunder's heavy hooves thudding in rhythm beside her. A few brave souls watched from shaded doorways, curiosity winning out over caution. Mrs. Hargrove shook her head in disbelief. Poor thing, she'll be gone by week's end. But Samuel Walker, watching from the general store's porch, saw something different. He saw the way Jessica never yanked the lead rope or raised her voice. He noticed how Thunder, for all his brawn and bluster, followed her with a wary respect. Jessica found a quiet spot near the edge of town, away from the stares and cruel laughter. She tied Thunder to a sturdy post, offering him water from a battered tin pail. He snorted, eyeing her warily, but finally dipped his head to drink. As twilight settled, Jessica sat cross-legged in the dirt, sharing a stale biscuit from her meager rations. She watched Thunder's silhouette against the fading light, heart heavy but resolute. Behind her, the noise of Silver Creek faded, replaced by the soft chirring of crickets and the occasional distant howl of a coyote. Jessica whispered to Thunder, her words half prayer, half promise, We'll show them. We'll make our own luck, you and me. And for the first time that day, Thunder seemed to relax, just a little. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something, a crack in the armor, a whisper of possibility beneath the vast, indifferent sky. Night came quickly at the edge of Silver Creek, the desert air cooling and the sky filling with stars that felt impossibly close and bright. Jessica Lawson set up a small camp just beyond the town's last street lamp. Her only companions, the restless gray horse, and a campfire built from scavenged wood. She had no money left for a bed in the hotel, nor any welcome from the boarding houses. In Silver Creek, folks weren't in the habit of offering charity, especially not to outsiders, and certainly not to a woman who just bought the meanest horse anyone could remember. Jessica sat cross-legged on the ground, wrapped in her thin blanket, listening to the distant, drunken singing from the saloon and the quieter sounds of thunder shifting beside her. The big horse paced inside a makeshift pen of rope and posts, snorting, still wary, still wild-eyed in the flickering firelight. Jessica watched him, her heart a mix of fatigue and quiet resolve. She chewed on a crust of hard biscuit and a piece of jerky, then broke off a sliver and placed it on the ground, just within Thunder's reach. Thunder eyed her, ears pricked forward, then snorted again. He didn't take the food, but he also didn't turn away. Jessica smiled a little, the smallest flicker of hope in her chest. "I'm not asking you to trust me," she said softly, her voice carrying in the still night air. "Just to give me a chance. That's all either of us has got." Isn't it? It was a rough start. Sleep came in short, broken stretches. Whenever Jessica drifted off, a strange noise or a stomp from Thunder startled her awake. Each time she checked the knots on his rope and whispered quiet reassurances until the horse calmed. At dawn, she rubbed the grit from her eyes, fed Thunder what little she could spare, and began thinking of how to earn enough for their next meal. She tried the livery stable first, but old Mr. Parsons shook his head before she could finish. "I ain't got work for you, miss, and I ain't looking for trouble. Folks are already saying you got a death wish, taking that brute off Pete Jenkins' hands." She tried the saloon, offering to sweep floors, but was met with laughter and a wagged finger from the bartender. "We don't hire girls for sweeping, and you sure as hell ain't pouring drinks. Maybe try the laundry if you want honest work." Jessica trudged from door to door, Thunder trailing her like a living shadow, each rejection stinging more than the last. Silver Creek was a hard place for the desperate, and harder still for those who wouldn't beg. As the morning wore on, she passed by the general store. Samuel Walker was arranging crates of canned peaches on the porch. He watched Jessica approach, his eyes filled with both caution and something gentler. Jessica hesitated, but Samuel nodded. "You need supplies?" She shook her head. "Not unless you're offering work instead of charity." Samuel paused, then glanced at Thunder, who stood quietly behind her, massive and unmoving. "That horse really yours?" Jessica met his gaze. "He is now. I'm hoping we can make something of each other." Samuel considered her for a long moment, then disappeared into the store. When he returned, he pressed a small bundle into Jessica's hands, a loaf of bread, a tin of beans, and a half-pound of oats for Thunder. "Call it a loan. You pay me back when you can." Jessica's throat tightened, gratitude flickering across her features, but she simply nodded. "Thank you. I will." She took her supplies and returned to her camp. As she prepared Thunder's oats, she spoke to him softly, explaining every move, trying to show she wasn't a threat. Thunder, for his part, watched her with those wary eyes, occasionally stretching his neck to sniff at her hand. Jessica didn't rush him. She knew trust couldn't be forced. That night, she let the campfire burn low and sat a little closer to Thunder, humming an old tune her mother used to sing on the prairie. She watched as Thunder, after a long hesitation, nibbled the oats from her open palm. The moment was small But to Jessica, it felt as mighty as a sunrise after a long, cold night. As the days passed, Jessica kept to the outskirts, rarely venturing into town except for necessities. She spent her time studying Thunder, watching how he moved, how he reacted to sudden noises or unfamiliar scents. Instead of breaking his will like other handlers, she gave him choices, speaking in a low voice and letting him come to her on his own terms. The progress was slow, a little less tension in his stance, a little more curiosity in his gaze. One afternoon, as Jessica was brushing Thunder's coat near the riverbank, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, hand resting on the horse's neck, ready for another insult or warning. But it was Samuel Walker, holding a battered tin cup and a shy smile. "I brought some coffee," Samuel said, offering the cup. "Figured you might need it." Jessica accepted, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the drink. They sat in the grass, talking about horses, old towns, and dreams that refused to die. Samuel didn't judge or pity. He simply listened. Thunder watched the pair with wary interest, then, after a long moment, stepped closer and nudged Samuel's arm. The storekeeper jumped, spilling a little coffee, but Jessica laughed, her first genuine laugh in days. Thunder didn't bolt or flinch. He just looked on, as if weighing whether these two humans might be worth his time after all. Word of Jessica's odd routine, talking softly to the wild horse, sleeping beside him under the stars, refusing to use a whip, spread through Silver Creek. Some folks called her crazy, others watched with cautious fascination. The children in town started sneaking down to the riverbank, hoping to catch a glimpse of Thunder's imposing form. Jessica would sometimes wave, but she kept her focus on her work, determined to let actions speak louder than words. On the third night, as a cold wind swept in from the plains, Thunder lay down beside Jessica's campfire for the first time. He didn't let her touch him, not yet, but he stayed close, his massive body a shield against the dark and the cold. Jessica stared into the fire, her eyes shining with hope and exhaustion. "We're not there yet, old friend, but we're getting closer." For the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, she believed it might just be true. Silver Creek's weather could turn on a dime. One day, the sun scorched and painted everything in sharp shadows. The next, the horizon boiled with thunderheads, threatening to sweep away the world Jessica Lawson was struggling to rebuild. Days had passed since she claimed Thunder as her own. Each morning brought small victories, Thunder allowing her to brush his tangled mane, standing calm while she spoke to him, lowering his head for a drink when she offered her hand. Yet Jessica knew true trust could not be rushed. Determined to make progress, Jessica woke before dawn one crisp morning, the sky still bruised with the colors of night. She led Thunder down to the wide, grassy meadow just outside town, the dew chilling her boots. The townsfolk were just stirring, and a few curious faces peered from behind windows as she passed. Pete Jenkins, always eager to stir trouble, shouted from his porch, "Hey, girl! Hope you said your prayers. You'll need 'em." Jessica ignored him, focusing instead on Thunder, who snorted and stamped beside her. Today was the day she would try to ride him. She had no saddle, just an old, worn blanket and her own courage. Jessica stroked Thunder's neck, murmuring softly, feeling his muscles tense beneath her hand. "All right, big fella, let's see what we can do." She moved with patience, looping the blanket over his back, speaking in a soothing tone, every movement deliberate. Thunder flinched, but didn't bolt. Jessica took a deep breath, slipped her boot into a stirrup she'd fashioned from rope, and swung herself up, settling lightly onto his back. For a moment, everything was still. Jessica could feel Thunder's heart racing beneath her legs, could sense the storm of confusion and resistance building inside him. She pressed her heels gently, hoping her calm would seep into the animal's bones. But then, as if the air itself changed, the distant rumble of thunder rolled across the plains, echoing off the foothills. Thunder's ears shot up, his body stiffened, and Jessica's breath caught. A sharp gust of wind carried the scent of rain and the electric tang of a coming storm. Thunder exploded beneath her, rearing back with a force that nearly sent Jessica tumbling. She clung to his mane, knuckles white, heart pounding. Thunder bucked once, twice, spinning in a wild circle. Jessica's world tilted, dust and sky swapping places, the ground rushing up to meet her. She hit hard, the impact jolting through her body. For a second, all she saw was spinning sky, and all she heard was the pounding of hooves and the growing roar of the storm. Thunder, wild-eyed, galloped away a few yards, then stopped, nostrils flaring, body quivering as lightning split the sky overhead. Rain hammered down, cold and relentless, turning the meadow to slick mud in minutes. Jessica forced herself to her knees, every muscle screaming, but refused to give in. She crawled, then stood shakily, ignoring the pain blossoming in her side and shoulder. Thunder danced at the edge of the field, torn between the urge to run and the instinct to stay close to the only person who hadn't raised a hand against him. Jessica steadied her breath, arms aching, clothes soaked through. She spoke as she moved, voice carrying over the wind. "It's all right. Easy, Thunder. I'm not leaving you. Not now." She moved slowly, hands out, wincing with each step. Thunder's ears twitched, his eyes rolling, but he let her come close. She laid a gentle hand on his neck, feeling his heartbeat thrumming like a war drum. For a moment he leaned into her touch, the fury of the storm swirling around them, but not between them. As the wind lashed and rain poured, Jessica and Thunder stood together in the open field. She pressed her forehead to his mane, the two of them shivering in the cold. Around them, the world was chaos. Rain streaking sideways, thunder shaking the ground, lightning illuminating the distant town. But in that moment, Jessica realized that neither of them was truly alone anymore. When the worst of the storm had passed, Jessica led Thunder to the shelter of a thick stand of cottonwoods by the river. She built a hasty lean-to, shivering as she gathered sticks with numb fingers. Thunder stood nearby, less restless now, head low, steam rising from his damp coat. Jessica started a fire, coaxing sparks from damp wood until a small flame caught. She wrapped herself in her blanket and sat close to Thunder, sharing what little warmth they could find. That night, bruised and bone-tired, Jessica refused to sleep far from Thunder. She watched the horse settle beside her, close enough that she could feel his breath on her cheek, and felt a strange comfort in his presence. Every time she shifted, Thunder raised his head, watching her, as if waiting for her to abandon him like so many before. But Jessica stayed, whispering stories from her childhood and promises she barely dared to believe herself. By dawn, the storm had broken. The meadow glistened, fresh and new, every blade of grass jeweled with dew. Jessica awoke to the sound of thunder nibbling nearby. His stance relaxed, his gaze, when it found hers, softer than before. She stretched, wincing at her bruises, but grinned through the pain. "We made it, didn't we?" Thunder snorted, his breath puffing in the morning chill, and for the first time, allowed Jessica to run her hand down his muzzle without flinching. The people of Silver Creek saw the battered pair returning that morning, mud-splattered and soaked to the bone, but walking together, step for step. The story of the girl and her wild horse, both stubborn enough to weather a storm, began to circulate in whispers, some mocking, some admiring, but all a little more curious than before. Jessica knew there would be more storms ahead, outside and within, but as she and Thunder moved forward together, she felt a small, stubborn hope growing in her chest. Sometimes, she realized, surviving the storm was the first step toward taming it. The storm that battered Silver Creek left its mark, not just in the broken fences and toppled barns, but in the shifting opinions of the townsfolk. For days afterward, Jessica and Thunder were the talk of the town. Wherever Jessica walked, muddy and bruised but unbowed, whispers trailed her steps. Some folks still snickered behind their hands, but more and more watched with a new curiosity, even a sliver of respect. One morning, a handful of children gathered near the riverbank, eyes wide as Thunder grazed quietly beside Jessica. The horse's size, once so intimidating, now seemed almost magical. The youngest, a freckled girl with tangled braids, crept closer, clinging to her brother's arm. "He don't look so scary now," she whispered. Jessica crouched down, her voice gentle. "He never was. He just needed someone to believe in him, that's all." As the sun climbed, Jessica returned to town with Thunder. She hoped to find odd jobs, anything to pay back Samuel, buy feed, maybe even earn a little trust. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A thunderstorm the previous night had collapsed one of the Miller family's barns. The town was rallying to help, but the pile of twisted beams was too much for a handful of men to lift. Jessica stepped forward, eyes steady. "Thunder and I can help." There was a pause. Then Mr. Miller's tired face broke into a hopeful smile. "If you think you can manage, miss, we'd be grateful." The work was hard. Jessica lashed ropes to the biggest beams, guiding Thunder as he strained against the weight. His muscles bunched and quivered, hooves digging into the mud, but slowly, piece by piece. They hauled the heavy timbers clear. Men and women stopped to watch. Even Pete Jenkins, leaning against a fence, had to admit under his breath, "Well, I'll be damned." By noon, the barn frame was upright. Sweat streaked Jessica's brow, her arms aching, but her spirit soared. She patted Thunder's neck. "Couldn't have done it without you, partner." Thunder tossed his head, almost proud, and the children watching cheered. With each passing day, Jessica's presence in Silver Creek grew less a source of ridicule and more a subject of fascination. She and Thunder helped haul supplies, clear debris, and mend fences around town. Wherever they went, children followed, drawn by Thunder's strength and Jessica's patient kindness. Some of the bravest even dared to feed him from their open palms. Samuel Walker found excuses to visit wherever Jessica was working, sometimes with a basket of fresh bread or a flask of coffee, always with an encouraging word. Their friendship deepened, conversations stretching into the evenings, laughter coming easier with each passing day. But Silver Creek was not a place where everyone's heart softened overnight. Pete Jenkins, stung by being proven wrong, grew sourer by the day. He watched from the shadows, whispering to anyone who'd listen. "She got lucky, is all. One of these days that beast'll turn on her, and then where'll we be?" Pete decided he wouldn't wait for fate. Late one afternoon, as Jessica was finishing work near the livery stable, Pete crept up behind Thunder, waving a length of burlap sack and rattling a tin can full of rocks. The horse startled, ears pinning back, muscles bunching in fear. Jessica spun around. "Pete, stop!" But before she could intervene, thunder surged forward, hooves thundering on the packed dirt. Instead of bolting, though, the horse wheeled and planted himself between Jessica and Pete, chest heaving, head lowered in warning. Pete stumbled backward, tripping over a feed bucket and landing hard in a pile of manure. Laughter erupted from the stable hands and townsfolk who'd gathered to watch. Pete scrambled to his feet, red-faced and furious, but Jessica stood her ground. She placed a steadying hand on Thunder's neck, never taking her eyes off Pete. "Don't take out your fear on my horse," she said, her voice clear as a bell. "You want to pick a fight? Pick it with me?" Pete glared, but the crowd was no longer on his side. He muttered something bitter and slunk away. After that day, the town's mood shifted even more. Folks who'd kept their distance began to nod greetings as Jessica passed. The butcher offered her a cut of meat at half price. Mrs. Hargrove, once so quick to gossip, sent over a pie for the brave lady and her horse. The children started calling Thunder the gentle giant. One evening, as Jessica and Samuel sat together on the general store porch, Samuel handed her a steaming cup of coffee. "You've changed things here," he said, studying her over the rim of his mug. "People see you differently now. They see Thunder differently, too." Jessica smiled, watching Thunder graze under the wide, pink sky. "I just tried to give him a second chance. Seems like this town was ready for one, too." Samuel hesitated, then reached out, his hand covering hers. Jessica didn't pull away. In the distance, Pete Jenkins watched from the shadows, resentment smoldering, but the rest of Silver Creek seemed at last willing to believe in something new. That night, as Jessica lay beside her campfire, Thunder settled down nearby, closer than ever before. She stared up at the endless stars, exhaustion mingling with hope. For the first time since arriving, Silver Creek felt less like a battleground and more like a place where she and Thunder might truly belong. A dusty wind swept through Silver Creek, rustling porch banners and setting the townsfolk on edge. Summer's heat lingered, heavy and anxious, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. News had come from the north. A gang led by the notorious Rebecca Blackwell was raiding settlements, burning farms, and leaving a trail of fear. The stories grew wilder with every retelling. Stolen cattle, barns torched, men beaten or worse. Silver Creek, for all its new sense of community, was no fortress. The possibility of violence crept into every conversation. Jessica felt it too. Every time Thunder's ears pricked at a sudden noise, or she noticed men talking in tight circles outside the saloon, her sense of unease grew. She worked harder than ever, helping rebuild the Miller barn by day and riding patrol at dusk, eyes sweeping the horizon for dust trails that didn't belong. It was one such evening, the sun a red wound on the edge of the prairie, when Samuel Walker found her sitting atop a fence post, staring out at the fading light. Thunder grazed nearby, calm but alert, tail flicking at flies. "Town council's called a meeting," Samuel said, voice low. "They're worried, Jess. We all are." Jessica swung her legs down and joined him on the dusty path. "It's not the first gang to come through these parts, but folks seem more scared this time." Samuel nodded. "Rebecca Blackwell's not like the rest. She's smart and she's mean." Last town that stood up to her didn't end well. They walked in silence. Jessica's boots raised tiny puffs of dust, her mind racing with old memories she'd rather leave buried. The meeting was held in the church hall, the pews packed with anxious faces. Even Pete Jenkins, who usually scoffed at town business, looked pale and tight-lipped. The councilman stood at the front, voice trembling. "We need a deputy. The sheriff's too old to ride the night patrol. Someone's got to lead if trouble comes." A hush fell. All eyes landed on Jessica. She shifted uncomfortably, sensing the unspoken challenge. Could the outsider, the girl with the wild horse, stand between them and the darkness on the horizon? Samuel stood, his voice steady. "I nominate Jessica Lawson. She's braver than any man here, and she's the only one Thunder listens to. If anyone can keep us safe, it's her." There was a ripple of murmurs, some in agreement, some in doubt. Pete Jenkins couldn't resist. "She ain't no lawman. Hell, she ain't even from around here." Jessica faced them, jaw clenched, the memory of another night, years ago, burning behind her eyes. A night when gunshots shattered her family's quiet ranch, when her younger brother Ben had tried to hide behind her, clutching her arm, and she'd been too slow, too scared to save him. "I appreciate your faith," she said, her voice hoarse. "But I'm no hero. I've lost people too. I know what it's like when the law doesn't come." Samuel stepped closer. "You don't have to do this alone. We'll all stand with you." Jessica's breath caught. The faces before her, worn, weathered, hopeful, were different from the ones she'd left behind in Missouri. These folks wanted to believe in her. Maybe she could believe in herself too, just this once. She nodded slowly. "All right, I'll help. But we do this together." No one faces Rebecca Blackwell alone. A weight seemed to lift from the room. The councilman pressed a battered tin badge into her hand, the metal cold and oddly heavy. Jessica looked down at it, thumb brushing over the word deputy, stamped crookedly across the front. That night, she rode out with Thunder, the badge pinned to her shirt, the townsfolk's trust like a fragile lantern burning in the dark. She set watch rotations, showed the men and women how to reinforce doors, and mapped the likely paths the gang might use. With Thunder at her side, she felt a little braver, his presence steady, his trust hard-won but fierce. But in the quiet moments, the past pressed in. Jessica lay by the fire, staring up at the stars, memory replaying her brother's last words, the fear in his eyes. She hadn't been able to save Ben, but maybe, just maybe, she could save someone now. The next morning, Samuel brought coffee and biscuits to her camp. He found her brushing Thunder's coat, eyes distant. "Rough night?" he asked. Jessica nodded, managing a small smile. "Just old ghosts. They're louder when you try to do something good." Samuel sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "You're not alone here. Silver Creek isn't Missouri." Jessica looked at him, searching for any sign of pity and finding none, only warmth and a quiet faith that startled her. She squeezed his hand, then stood, feeling lighter somehow, more rooted to this patch of wild, uncertain land. The town began to change. People trained together, built barricades, and practiced shooting old rifles at tin cans lined on fence posts. Even Pete Jenkins, though still grumbling, lent his strong back to hauling sandbags. And every evening, Jessica rode Thunder along the perimeter, the great horse's shadow stretching long and proud in the dying light, the badge glinting on her chest. She was an outsider no longer. She was Silver Creek's deputy, bound by honor, hope, and the memory of all she'd lost. For the first time, the threat of Rebecca Blackwell didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning, a chance for Jessica, for Thunder, and for all of Silver Creek to stand together against the darkness. The air in Silver Creek crackled with anticipation. Word had spread. Rebecca Blackwell and her gang were closing in, leaving nothing but fear and scorched earth behind them. But something in the town had changed. Where once there was suspicion and division, now there was a thread of unity binding folks together. Jessica Lawson, with Thunder always at her side and the deputy's badge pinned to her chest, was at the heart of it all. She wasted no time. "If we're going to stand a chance," she told the council one morning, "we need to act like a team, not just a bunch of scared neighbors. Rebecca Blackwell expects us to be weak. Let's prove her wrong." Every able-bodied person in Silver Creek was put to work. The men, women, and even some of the older children gathered in the square at sunrise, tools in hand and determination on their faces. Jessica organized patrols, mapped out lookout points on the hills, and made sure every household knew what to do if the alarm was sounded. She spent her days with Thunder, teaching him new signals and using his brute strength to haul logs and heavy crates. The townspeople watched in awe as the giant horse dragged barricade materials into place and responded to Jessica's soft-spoken commands with remarkable precision. Thunder had become more than a curiosity. He was the symbol of Silver Creek's stubborn resilience. As dusk fell one evening, Jessica gathered a group outside the general store. Samuel Walker stood at her side, rifle in hand, his jaw set with quiet resolve. Pete Jenkins, who'd once doubted her at every turn, now listened closely. His usual sneer replaced with something like respect. "We can't just hole up and hope for the best," Jessica said. "Rebecca's gang is smart, and they're mean. But they won't expect us to fight together. They'll expect fear, not courage." She outlined her plan, using Thunder to pull wagon loads of hay bales into choke points, digging trenches at key spots, and setting tripwires using old cans and cowbells to sound the alarm. "They won't take this town without a fight," Jessica promised, and the crowd murmured their agreement. The following days were a blur of work and tension. Jessica and Samuel led training sessions in the churchyard, teaching the townsfolk how to reload old rifles, how to duck behind cover, how to hold their ground even when their hands trembled. Children helped, running messages, carrying supplies, and practicing with slingshots on rows of tin cans. Every evening, Jessica rode Thunder through the town's perimeter, her presence a living promise that no one would be left to stand alone. Sometimes she caught glimpses of folks watching her from behind curtains or lantern-lit porches. She made it a point to wave, to tip her hat, to remind them that hope was stronger when shared. As the week wore on, fear mixed with a new sense of pride. Neighbors who'd barely spoken before now shared meals by the fire, swapping stories and encouraging words. Mrs. Hargrove, who once gossiped behind Jessica's back, now brought biscuits to the defenders. Old Mr. Parsons, long retired from the saddle, lent his sharp eyes as a lookout on the church steeple. Late one night, as Jessica checked the barricades near the old mill, Samuel found her sitting on an overturned crate, hands shaking with exhaustion. Thunder grazed nearby, his huge frame casting a reassuring shadow in the moonlight. "You're running yourself ragged," Samuel said, settling beside her. "Let someone else take a turn." Jessica smiled wearily. "I keep thinking about my brother. He would have wanted me to stand up, to fight for what's right." Samuel hesitated, then took her hand. "You're not alone, Jess. You never have to be. Not here, not now." For a moment, Jessica let the walls she'd built around her heart slip away. She told Samuel about Ben, about the night she lost him, about the guilt and fear that followed her west like a ghost. Samuel listened, never interrupting, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. When she finished, he squeezed her hand and said, "You don't have to carry that weight by yourself. Not anymore." Tears pricked Jessica's eyes, but she blinked them away, swallowing her pain. "Thank you, Samuel. I'm not sure what I'd do without you." He leaned in, and for the first time, Jessica let herself hope that the future might hold more than just survival. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, the kind that promised new beginnings even as darkness loomed. Thunder snorted softly, as if to say he approved, and Jessica laughed through her tears. For a while the fear faded, replaced by warmth, by the possibility of healing, by love she'd never dared to imagine. The next morning, Jessica addressed the townsfolk in the square. "Rebecca Blackwell's gang is coming, but so are we. We're not running, and we're not hiding. This is our home." Cheers erupted, strong and proud. The children who once cowered behind their mothers now stood with sticks and slingshots, grinning with fierce bravery. Silver Creek had found its heart, and Jessica knew it was ready. That night, as the town settled in behind their defenses, Jessica and Samuel walked the silent streets, fingers entwined, thunder following close behind. The stars above seemed brighter, the world a little less dark. Whatever came next, Jessica was no longer the lonely stranger with nothing but a battered hat and a dream. She was the deputy of Silver Creek, the woman who'd taught a wild horse and a wild town that trust, hope, and second chances could turn even the hardest soil into home. Dawn in Silver Creek arrived with an uneasy stillness. The townspeople moved quietly behind their barricades, eyes darting to the horizon where the land shimmered in the morning heat. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every gust of wind stirred the nerves that had built up over the long, sleepless night. Jessica Lawson stood in the middle of Main Street, Thunder beside her, both of them alert and motionless. She wore her battered hat and deputy's badge, a rifle slung over her shoulder, her eyes hard with determination. Around her, the people of Silver Creek crouched behind wagons, barrels, and stacked hay bales, everyone ready, just as they'd trained. Then, from the north, a dust cloud rose, a dozen riders thundering toward town, Rebecca Blackwell's red scarf billowing at the front. The gang moved with practiced menace, guns gleaming, shouts echoing across the flat land. Jessica's heart hammered, but her voice was calm as she called out orders. "Hold your positions! Don't fire until you see the signal!" Thunder stamped his hooves, sensing the tension, but stayed steady. Jessica glanced at Samuel on the opposite side of the street, his face set with resolve, rifle at the ready. Rebecca and her gang thundered into Silver Creek, expecting fear, expecting chaos. Instead, they were met by silence and the unwavering gaze of a town united. Rebecca slowed her horse and surveyed the scene, her eyes sharp and cold. "Well, well," she called, her voice taunting. "Looks like you folks got tired of running." Jessica stepped forward, rifle in hand. "This is your only warning, Rebecca. Turn around now, and nobody gets hurt." Rebecca's laughter rang out, harsh as a crow's cry. "I don't take orders from little girls or scared townsfolk. Boys, let's show them how it's done." Suddenly, the gang spread out, firing into the air, trying to break the line with shock and fear, but Silver Creek held steady. At Jessica's signal, a sharp whistle, Thunder surged forward, pulling a barricade of hay bales across the main street, cutting off the gang's advance. Chaos exploded. The outlaws tried to push through, but the town's traps worked as planned. Hidden tripwires sent cowbells clanging. Spooked horses reared and bucked, blocking the narrow alleys. The townsfolk returned fire, aiming low, driving the attackers back without killing. Children darted between buildings, relaying messages and tossing stones from slingshots. Jessica and Thunder became the heart of the defense. Thunder, massive and unyielding, charged at the outlaws who tried to break through. His hooves thundered against the packed dirt, scattering two gunmen and forcing them to scramble behind overturned barrels. Rebecca, furious, singled out Jessica. She spurred her horse straight at her, guns blazing, but Jessica was ready. She dove behind Thunder, bullets whizzing past, and returned fire, clipping Rebecca's scarf and knocking her hat to the dust. The fight surged down the length of Main Street, shots ringing out, smoke curling in the air. Samuel, covering Jessica from behind a wagon, called out when he saw a gang member sneaking around the livery. "Jess! Left side!" Jessica spun, sighted, and fired, sending the outlaw fleeing. Rebecca's men tried every trick, circling behind the saloon, setting fire to a haystack, using townsfolk as shields. But the traps, teamwork, and Thunder's sheer presence kept the advantage with Silver Creek. Even Pete Jenkins, rifle trembling in his hands, stood firm in the doorway of the general store, driving back two raiders with wild, desperate shots. The outlaws' confidence cracked as they realized the town wouldn't break. Several threw down their guns and ran, chased by angry townspeople wielding pitchforks and broom handles. The final act came near the church. Rebecca, out of ammunition and cornered by Jessica and Samuel, tried to escape through the graveyard. Jessica gave chase, Thunder galloping at her side, hooves tearing up tufts of grass. Rebecca ducked behind a crumbling headstone, pistol in hand. "Stay back!" she snarled, her voice trembling for the first time. "You don't know what it's like out here. Only the ruthless survive." Jessica slowed, lowering her rifle, voice steady but fierce. "It doesn't have to be this way, Rebecca. You can choose something different. It's not too late." Rebecca's eyes darted between Jessica and Thunder, confusion flickering across her face. For a moment, the two women, both shaped by hardship and loss, locked eyes. Then Rebecca's shoulders slumped, and the pistol fell from her hand. Jessica moved quickly, cuffing Rebecca's hands behind her back, breathless but victorious. "You're coming with me. Silver Creek does things by the law." Samuel arrived a moment later, relief written all over his face. Thunder nuzzled Jessica's shoulder, as if to say, "We did it." The smoke and noise faded, replaced by the stunned silence of a town that had survived the unthinkable. Children ran into the streets, cheering. Women embraced husbands and sons. The townsfolk crowded around Jessica, Samuel, and Thunder, no longer outsiders, but heroes. As the sheriff took Rebecca Blackwell into custody, Jessica looked around at the battered but unbroken faces of Silver Creek. She saw pride, gratitude, and something else, a hope that ran deeper than any scar. Thunder snorted, tossing his wild mane, and Jessica scratched his ear with a tired grin. "We made it, big guy. We really made it." Night fell, bringing a sense of peace Silver Creek hadn't known in years. The townspeople gathered in the square, sharing food, laughter, and stories beneath a sky alive with stars. For the first time, Jessica felt the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a future she'd helped shape, with courage, trust, and a horse that no one would ever doubt again. The sun rose soft and golden over Silver Creek the morning after the fight, warming the battered streets and washing away the last traces of smoke. The town, once braced for ruin, awoke to a new kind of quiet, one threaded with relief and cautious joy. From the rooftops to the riverbank, Silver Creek breathed a little easier. Its people changed by what they had survived together. Jessica Lawson, exhausted but unbroken, walked Main Street with Thunder beside her. The big gray draft horse moved with a gentle pride, pausing now and then to let a child stroke his mane or feed him an apple. The fear he once inspired had been replaced by awe and affection, especially among the youngest. Children followed in his wake, giggling and daring each other to get close, while their parents watched with open admiration. Jessica tipped her hat at every greeting, her smile softer than anyone in town had seen before. The townsfolk, who once doubted her and whispered behind her back, now met her eyes with genuine warmth. Mrs. Hargrove pressed a loaf of bread into Jessica's arms, her hands trembling. "You saved my boy," she whispered, voice thick with gratitude. "Silver Creek owes you more than we can ever say." Jessica shook her head. "It wasn't just me, ma'am. This town stood together." That afternoon, Silver Creek held a gathering in the square, not just to celebrate their victory, but to heal old wounds. The battered, burned, and frightened all found comfort in each other. Food appeared on every table, music drifted from the saloon, and laughter, hesitant at first, soon rang clear and free. Samuel Walker was never far from Jessica's side. He watched her with open pride, sometimes reaching for her hand when no one was looking. After the meal, Samuel led her away from the crowd, his eyes shining with a nervous excitement. "Come with me, Jess," he said softly. He took her to the edge of town, where the river wound between cottonwoods. The air was filled with birdsong and the gentle splash of water. Thunder grazed nearby, always close enough to keep an eye on them. Samuel took a shaky breath, then knelt in the soft grass, a simple silver ring held in his calloused hand. "I've waited a long time to find someone I could believe in, someone who'd fight for this town and for me, no matter the odds. I love you, Jessica Lawson. Will you marry me?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears, her heart leaping in her chest. She knelt beside him, laughing through her tears. "I thought you'd never ask." He slipped the ring on her finger, and their laughter echoed through the trees, mingling with the river and the wind. Thunder nudged them both, as if claiming his place in their new family. As the celebration faded into twilight, the council gathered in the churchyard to thank Jessica publicly. The sheriff, his voice rough with emotion, pinned the town's official star to her shirt. "Silver Creek would be honored if you'd be our sheriff, Jessica. You're the bravest soul I've ever known." A cheer broke out, the whole town clapping and stamping their feet. Jessica glanced at Samuel, at Thunder, and at the townsfolk gathered close. She saw in their faces not just relief, but respect, and something more: belonging. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady and proud. "But only if you stand with me. Silver Creek's only as strong as the people who call it home." That night, as lanterns glowed in every window and music played into the small hours, Jessica sat on the boardwalk, her boots crossed and Thunder's head resting in her lap. She watched as neighbors who'd barely spoken before now swapped stories and shared food. She saw the town's children, fearless, chasing fireflies and daring each other to touch Thunder's nose. Samuel joined her, leaning against the rail. "It's different now, isn't it?" Jessica nodded, stroking Thunder's mane. Everything feels possible. He smiled, squeezing her hand. That's because of you and Thunder. You didn't just save us. You showed us what we could be. The night was filled with hope and gentle laughter. Pete Jenkins, grudging but not unkind, raised a toast to Jessica from across the street. To the woman with more guts than all of us put together. Jessica grinned, tipping her cup in return. Even old Mr. Parsons, who doubted her from the beginning, sent over a sack of oats for Thunder and a nod of approval. As the stars filled the sky, Jessica realized how much had changed. She was no longer the penniless outsider, nor Thunder the wild, dangerous horse. They were the heart of Silver Creek, living proof that trust and compassion could heal even the deepest wounds. Later, in the quiet of their new home on the town's edge, Jessica and Samuel sat together, plans for a future spinning in their minds, fields to plant, children to raise, stories to tell. Thunder stood sentry outside their door, head high, the children's laughter still ringing in his ears. Jessica looked out into the dark, her heart full. "We found our place, didn't we, Thunder?" The horse snorted, nuzzling her shoulder, and Jessica smiled. No longer a stranger, but a hero, a leader, and at last, truly home. Months passed, and the fierce memories of the showdown faded into the fabric of everyday life in Silver Creek. Where once the town had braced for trouble at every turn, now there was a gentler rhythm, a sense of safety and belonging that could be felt in every corner, from the sunlit porches to the laughter-filled schoolyard. Jessica Lawson and Samuel Walker settled on a patch of land at the edge of town, where the rolling grass met the blue of the distant hills. Their ranch was small but lively, a place where second chances grew as surely as wildflowers after rain. Thunder, once the terror of the auction block, now wandered the pastures with a contented calm, his powerful form a familiar sight to all. The town flourished. New families arrived, drawn by stories of a place where folks looked out for each other, where even the hardest hearts could change. The general store bustled. The schoolhouse rang with lessons and laughter, and the old church bells marked the passing of peaceful days. Jessica's days were busy, balancing her duties as sheriff, tending to the ranch, and building a home with Samuel. She never lost her habit of rising before dawn, coffee in hand, watching as the light crept over the prairie. Sometimes she rode the fence line, Thunder's hoofbeats steady beside her, both of them savoring the hush of morning and the promise it held. People often stopped by the ranch, seeking advice or simply company. Children came to visit Thunder, who had learned to nuzzle their pockets for apples and stand patient while small hands braided flowers into his mane. Some afternoons, Jessica led riding lessons, her voice clear and encouraging, helping nervous boys and girls find their confidence on Thunder's broad back. Word spread far and wide about the sheriff and her horse. Travelers paused in Silver Creek to hear the story firsthand, how a penniless cowgirl tamed the wildest horse in the territory, how together they stood against outlaws and brought hope to a struggling town. Around campfires at night, the tale grew with every telling, passed from mouth to mouth until it became legend. The townsfolk carried their own scars and memories, but Silver Creek became a place of healing. Neighbors who once kept to themselves now gathered for harvest dances, shared meals, and the annual autumn fair. Even Pete Jenkins, softened by time and humbled by his mistakes, built a small smithy near the river and became one of Jessica's fiercest supporters. He'd shake his head with a grin and say, "I never thought I'd see the day when a horse and a stubborn woman made a believer out of me." Samuel and Jessica built their life slowly, with patience learned from hardship, their home filled with warmth, fresh bread on the windowsill, music floating from Samuel's fiddle, and laughter that rang out long after the sun slipped behind the hills. They found joy in the ordinary, tending gardens, mending fences, sharing quiet evenings on the porch while thunder grazed nearby, the sunset painting his coat silver. On their first spring together, Samuel planted a row of cottonwood trees along the road to the ranch. "For all the new beginnings," he said, and Jessica squeezed his hand, knowing that hope could take root even in the hardest ground. Thunder's legend only grew. Each year, Jessica rode him in the Founder's Day parade, children running alongside, faces shining with pride. At every stop, folks begged for the story, and Jessica would tell it, not just of how she tamed Thunder, but how he tamed her, teaching her patience, trust, and the courage to love again. Sometimes, on warm summer nights, Jessica would sit beside the campfire, a ring of children and grown-ups listening intently as she spun the tale. She spoke of loss and fear, of finding strength in unexpected places, and of the way a stubborn horse changed not just her life, but the heart of an entire town. As the years passed, the bond between Jessica and Thunder deepened. He grew grayer around the muzzle, slower in his step, but never lost the fierce intelligence in his eyes. Jessica, too, changed, her hair streaked with silver, her laughter richer, her shoulders strong from carrying the burdens and blessings of leadership. Silver Creek thrived. The lessons of trust and second chances echoed through generations. Young people who'd grown up hearing Jessica's story came to her for advice, determined to carve out their own destinies. The town council, once wary and divided, became a model for fairness and compassion, led by a woman who never forgot what it was like to stand on the outside looking in. One evening, after a day spent mending fences and settling disputes, Jessica and Samuel sat on their porch, hands entwined, watching the sun slip low behind the hills. Thunder grazed quietly in the field, children's laughter drifting on the breeze from a picnic down by the river. Jessica leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder. "Do you think people will remember us years from now?" Samuel smiled, kissing her hair. "They'll remember Thunder, and they'll remember you, the woman who taught a town to believe in itself again." Jessica gazed at the twilight horizon, her heart full. If even one person learns to give someone a second chance because of us, that's enough. As dusk deepened, Jessica saddled Thunder one last time that day. She rode him slowly up the ridge behind their ranch, the town spreading out below like a patchwork of hope and hard-won peace. At the crest, she paused, turning to watch the lights flicker on one by one. The legend of Jessica and Thunder would live on, not just in stories, but in every act of kindness, every risk taken for trust, every life remade by patience and love. Their journey had started with nothing but a battered hat, a wild horse, and a stubborn dream. It blossomed into a legacy that would outlast them both. As the stars came out, Jessica patted Thunder's neck, feeling the strength and gentleness there. "Let's go home, partner," she whispered. They rode down the hill together, disappearing into the warm embrace of Silver Creek, leaving behind not just hoofprints, but hope. A reminder for all who followed that true strength comes not from force, but from trust and the courage to begin again.